There's interesting things, like when you go through the ritual, if people know about different esoteric practices where you cannot have metals on you, gold, silver, etc., because they will interfere with the energy, you also take those items off during Masonic ritual. Rings, coins, etc. are temporarily placed aside.
That is interesting, because I would imagine the gold would have been a conductor for that energy, not something that they would want to put aside.
Yeah, but what energy?
And we are back with Joaquin, our Masonic mystery man. Thanks so much for being with us, Joaquin.
Yeah, this has been an amazing interview so far.
Thank you. It's been a journey.
So, some people say that the layout of DC is Masonic itself. True. The layout of a lodge room is similar to the actual layout of DC itself. Specifically, the relationship between the Washington Monument and the White House is the same as the relationship between an altar in Masonry and the Master of the Lodge, typically known as the Master in the East. So that relationship in terms of physical aspect and distance is similar. Even judges' gavels, the shape and character of those, heavily Masonic as well. The fact that the judge sits above you, in fact, in use in Masonic lodges as well with the gavel. That's how the Master of the Lodge brings the lodge to order, with the gavel from his elevated position. There's all kinds of other things. They do have guards during Masonry when it's in session. They have a person who's armed at the door. I think some of them carry a firearm in modern times, but they actually have, at least in my lodge, they had the old regalion, so they actually carry a really cool medieval sword. So they're literally guarding the door with the sword to prevent, as they call it, cowens and eavesdroppers from hearing the business conducted in a Masonic.
So they're going to cut their ears off?
They're going to do something. Yeah. And again, this is all, it's so funny to think about, because if you really get in the mental image, it's almost like this cartoon world. But these are very real people with a lot of power in society. You'd think it's something that you might play when you're like in a high school play or something, but this really does go down like this in the Masonic Lodge. It's a fascinating pageantry. Some people are drawn to this kind of symbolism, this kind of rank. People are attracted to the military and certain religious ceremonies for the same reason. It does have a very almost comfortable feeling when you're going through it. Some aspects are, questionable, to say the least, from a deeper esoteric perspective. But they tell you in Masonry that nothing you will do or say or obligate yourself to in Masonry, at least in Blue Lodge Masonry, will interfere with the duty to whatever God or higher being you believe in. And so that's comforting, and that's one reason I'm still willing to remain in Masonry, because I do believe that it's, even though it touches on these spiritual things, but Blue Lodge Masonry itself is kind of like the light version of real Hermeticism or real magical occult things. It alludes to it by means of signs and symbols, and you can almost think of it, and some scholars do think of it, as a kind of training ground for people who will go on to those things, training them in loyalty, in obedience to a system, to a hierarchy, and in giving them some of the symbols, like an inner court and an outer court. And since I've chosen not to go into the inner court, I can't really comment on that.
Who controls the British crown? Who keeps the metric system down? We do. We do.
Who leaves Atlantis off the maps?
Who keeps the Martians under wraps? We do. We do. Who holds back the electric car? Who makes E. Gutenberg a star? We do. We do. Who robs Kingfish of their sight?
Who rigged every Oscar night?
We do. We do.
But I will say, and I didn't know this at the time because this was years before a lot of this information had come out, at least I had never heard of it, and there was no Edge of Wonder back then. I was invited to a party while I was a Mason by one of the other brothers. He said, "Oh yeah, we have these parties on the weekend," and this is going to sound like I'm making it up, but these are the exact words he said. He said, "Yeah, it's like a masquerade. Everybody wears a costume. You know, you'll love it. We have a house right across from the Clintons, up in the Hamptons."
Put your Baphomet.
That's what he said. He
That's
said,
gone.
"Our house is right across the street from the Clintons in the Hamptons." And I said, "Oh, pretty Tony, huh?" But at that time, I didn't drink. I still don't drink, so I didn't feel like going. I'm like, I'll pass. No thanks. Who knows what happens at those parties?
Oh, but I mean, from everything that we've researched,
from the Clintons?
yeah, the masquerade parties are where the sexual stuff happens.
And I've watched Eyes Wide Shut. I know what you're saying. Those robes in Eyes Wide Shut are extremely similar to Rosicrucian robes, the black robes that they wear. I can't comment on the rest because I haven't experienced it, but he did say, we're right across the street from the Clintons, and that was like a come on, like, hey, these are the people you'll be socializing with. So who knows, maybe I'd have met Jeffrey Epstein while he was alive.
Oh dear Lord.
Thankfully I ducked that bullet. But Masonry is not, but is tangentially related to a lot of stuff in higher society, for better or worse. I've met some lovely people in Masonry, some genuine people that I would call brother, and they are really kind, excellent people, near as I can figure of them. I'm not going to defame Masonry here. I'm not going to paint with too broad a brush, because I truly don't believe that everyone goes to these things whatsoever actually happens at them, nor does everyone go in for the kind of mystical side or occult side of Masonry. Some people are just kind of there because maybe their family was there. Some of these people's family last name, they've been Masons for generation after generation. As talks that are given in Masonry show, they will highlight a certain brother who's been with the lodge since his grandparents came here from the old world, since like the 1600s. So there's this fascinating history, and it's not all dark. Otherwise, I think great people like George Washington would have never associated themselves with it. But something is or has crept in over the years, and there are definitely some dark corners of Masonry, if you want. There's something called Black Lodge Masonry. You tell me what that is. It was barely explained to me what it is. They said, "Oh, you may know at the higher degrees, whatever, whatsoever." Somebody described that there's a room. This was mind blowing. This was not somebody that I actually met in Masonry, but someone I met in a different social circle. And they said they'd seen this, but I didn't know this person really well, so who's to say the veracity of this information? But they said, and this is going to sound super high level to people, but she was not a Mason, but somehow knew about it. She said there's a room where future events are on the wall of this room in what amounts to like poster format, like movie posters, like this event, that event, this event. Not unlike maybe, I don't know, some of the artwork in Epstein's house, right, where you have
Bill Clinton in a dress.
Right. Hopefully not in that room, but they just said it was like as if these things are just scenes from the future that someone has printed out with a laser printer or something and put on the wall of this room.
Were these like drawings, or were they like?
I didn't see them.
photographs?
I didn't see them, and this person is like, a few degrees removed from me, so I can in no way vouch for the veracity of this information. But she claims that there's this room, and it has a table in it, and it's kind of like a circular room, and on the walls are things that's going to happen.
So it's
in the
not that
future.
far-fetched, because I mean, if they're doing occult stuff and rituals, and then if someone's going into whatever, like seeing the future, and then telling others about it, and they're either like painting it or whatever, that's one aspect, unless there's some kind of like technology, like Project Looking Glass, that they're using to actually see directly into the future.
Yeah, all the above is possible in my opinion. But again, in aggregate, all these little fascinating bits of information are entirely fascinating to me. Wow, this really is something here, but I don't know what it is. Now, this next story I'm going to tell you is a personal story, which I can definitely vouch for the veracity of the person. So without giving too much away, there's a person in my business circle, not, again, a woman, not directly through Masonry, but through a friend of a friend in Masonry. We became good friends over the years. Her daughter, she was married to a wealthy, I believe, Saudi of some kind. She has a ton of money. She has a big house on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, almost like a whole floor of an apartment building. She's a wealthy socialite woman. I'm not going to say her name, but her daughter, before Prince William was married, her daughter briefly dated Prince William. Okay, so that gives you some idea of what social circle she's
He's
in.
a reptilian, isn't he?
During this courtship, which lasted several months, or some not too long but not too short period, and this is fairly sad, but this daughter of hers developed a mental illness. She actually has a letter which she shared with me. I didn't see the letter, but I believe her about this letter. Prince William basically wrote a personal letter apologizing to her and her mother for having to break off the relationship. He said, I'm sorry, I do have feelings for your daughter, but as you can imagine, someone of my personage cannot really be seen in public with someone who has a mental illness. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to, basically discontinue this relationship. And so they were, kind of that close to being Kate Middleton. But,
Wow.
so, but again,
With the mental illness, though,
this whole thing, it basically onset, this is the really, if you want to get kind of spooky with it,
yeah.
it basically onset during their courtship.
That's what I was going to ask.
What do you
there
mean by
was
that?
no-
She didn't have any mental
There was
illness
no
before she started dating.
prior-
Exactly.
There's no prior evidence of mental illness. And though she did not reveal any details to me, her husband also died at some point after what she told me, making some kind of financial deal. He lost a bunch of money. He died. She's had a lot of tragedy in her family, the poor woman. But now, and I don't know what she knows, but I know that now, and I've actually helped her with this project a little bit. She runs now with her money a Saving Children charity. So
Wow.
those are some dots
Yeah.
in space, you could say. And I know this woman personally. This is not, this is what she told me personally.
Wow.
So, there are things, and there are things.
There's
So these are some of the, kind of life adventures I've had, I guess. But,
And who's like some of the bigger people anybody that you've actually met? I don't know if you want to talk.
Okay, so I actually don't know for sure who the person was, but there was one time when I was in the lodge and people kind of were, getting excited or hushed because we're going to have what was described as one of the Rockefellers visit the lodge. They're, notorious for being reclusive. I still to this day don't know who this person was. They were very elderly. Ben told me from my description could have been David Rockefeller. I'm not sure. They were very elderly at this time. They said, oh, one of the Rockefellers is coming, and his handlers were pushing him on a wheelchair, and he looked very ill. He looked about to die, I would say. He looked about to die, and this is going to sound like I'm making it up, but I really did feel this, upon seeing him, I thought, man, you know, I don't know what is wrong with this person. Like, I really felt something I would say I'd never experienced on meeting another person on this earth. It was very cold, his overall energy, you know, like an aura or what have you. Of course, I couldn't see it per se, but, you know, I just felt cold. Like the whole room, in fact, felt like it had gotten a few degrees colder, which I almost would doubt myself, except I've heard other people say this about. And he also had something which I can only describe as being straight out of a movie. If you ever see like Nosferatu or these other kind of vampire movies, and you know, people are going to say this, well, this is really incredible, but really and truly, he had a vein on the side of his neck that was extremely enlarged and also a little bit translucent. It was like a red vein in otherwise almost albino skin.
Weird.
That's crazy.
And he, you know, I was immediately a little bit frightened of him.
I would be too.
As I said, you know, the room felt colder. I was maybe, I don't know, 20 feet away from him, something like this. In the room, I was on one side, he was on another. The lodge was in session. He was just listening. He didn't really say anything. They were talking about various financial matters, you know, where they're going to invest money. You know, this is always a topic of formal Masonic meetings, is what they're going to spend the money on. It's pretty much the business at hand is money. That's it, money. Because without politics and religion, you just discuss business, right? So it was just, you know, kind of like one for the record books experience, you know, just to, I can't describe it. It was fairly unpleasant, you could say. Anyways, was introduced as such without the first name being given.
How did everybody else in the room kind of respond to him? Did they have the kind of same feeling that you had?
With almost no response.
Okay.
There was almost no, how do I describe it? It's like everyone is transfixed on the business at hand, and so you would give a nod to the guest, because he arrived late. He arrived like partway through an ongoing meeting. So people, I think, gave him a nod of recognition if they knew him or what have you, but there was no formal exchange, and maybe that's how he liked it. He appeared to be a very quiet person, very introspective, if you can call it that, you know, absorbed in his own thoughts, for lack of a better description. Almost like he wasn't really there, just was there, but, you know, and people, oh, that's so-and-so, you know, important, but then they just carried on with their business, you know.
David Zombie Feller.
You know, but it was, you know, it's like a surreal kind of thing, you know, to have, because it was so cold, I can't impress enough. It was really like being in a cold room. Like him coming into the room, it sounds like an exaggeration, but it really felt colder, physically colder, not just spiritually. I feel he's not in such a good way colder, but like the temperature has dropped in this room colder. That kind of feeling.
Why is it that, from your perspective, that the Masons view bloodline to be so important? Because from all of our research, it all seems to go back to these fallen angel bloodlines where these bloodline people think that they came from these ancient biblical times from somewhere else, and they have the fallen or the watchers, like this kind of thing. So
Anunnaki,
whatever. What is it? What do you think, from your experience, that this thing is?
For sure, there are people who regard themselves highly and see themselves as of fundamental importance to the functioning of society. You know, they really do, I think, from talking to some of them, see themselves as kings among men, or maybe even gods among men, in the sense, not in the direct sense that they would say that in conversation, but how they talk about affairs is as if it's something under their direction rather than being something that the rest of us might see from afar or abstractly. It's their domain to talk about it and to handle it and to administrate it, and they have the money and the connections and everything else to do so. And, you know, they talk about everything from running the Players Club in Manhattan to the old 21 Club. I'm not so familiar with this, but you can look that up. They have stories from this. These people, you know, big shot editors, publishers, among some of my personal friends and acquaintances there, people who have a lot to say at a boardroom table, you know. As somebody in one of my business circles once told me, you know, who talks about Ferraris and Lamborghinis? Poor people, right? These guys don't care about that kind of thing. They care about impact and legacy. They care about what they're able to do in society and how society will remember them. Those two things are of primary importance. Everything else is whatever, you know, it's just some money, right? These guys have this kind of money. When you're on that level, and maybe your family has been on that level for many, many years, as some of these people have, the normal things are not your concern. You've moved on, and you want to deal with the more important things. And whether they really are in charge or see themselves as such, or maybe it's the world's biggest case of megalomania in their own mind that they are really in charge, but they want to be. They want to hold the levers of power. That's what is pleasing to them, you know. And some of them do, I would say, for sure they do.
Is this why like philanthropy is like so important to them?
Philanthropy is one of the main things that Masonry uses its money for. Masonry is a kind of nonprofit, or lodges often are registered as nonprofit organizations. Some of them may even be NGOs. I haven't looked into the legal structure of them. As they put an enormous amount of philanthropy work. I've even forwarded my own proposals to them at times of what I think they should donate to. I won't get into that, but they donate to certain charities regularly, and they donate the enormous sums of money that they seem to have on hand, probably have had on hand for a long time. It's the kind of thing where they'll drop a couple mil at a lodge meeting. You know, they'll say $1 million to this, 12 to this, whatever. You know.
But did you have to pay dues?
Yes, but the dues are trivial. I think, you know, the dues, depending where you belong, somewhere between $45 and $200 a year. You know, they're trivial. The dues are trivial from the actual members. The money that they have definitely doesn't come from that. It comes from holdings, some of which seem to actually go back to the Templars. They've had this kind of money under their control for a long time.
Holy cow.
And the work, if you can call it the work of Masonry, is where the money goes. They talk about the architect, the master of the lodge is the architect, right, of that lodge. They're even referred to as worshipful master in the ceremony of the lodge. Interestingly, there's masters in 4 cardinal directions in a lodge. Some people say the word news comes from north, east, south, west. Some people say that's been debunked. But I can tell you, in a lodge, there's warden in the west, north, south, and the most important, in the east. And they each give an update, as it will, in the ceremony of the lodge. They update how their domain of enterprise is going, kind of like you might do at a board meeting or something. You know, they'll give an update of the affairs under their management, and then regular business is conducted, and you keep minutes, and there's a secretary and everything, just like a corporate boardroom would have. But they have this very esoteric form, and everyone does this ritual work at the beginning of every meeting. They call it as such. They call it ritual work.
And by the sacred parchment, I swear that if I reveal the secrets of the stonecutters, may my stomach become bloated and my head be plucked of all but 3 hairs.
I think you should have to take a different oath.
Everyone takes the same oath. Welcome to the club number 908. You have joined the sacred order of the stonecutters, who since ancient times have split the rocks of ignorance that obscure the light of knowledge and truth. Now let's all get drunk and play ping pong.
Because he's already kind of heavy, you know.
So going back to Jacques du Molay, because you're saying how this money comes from
The Templars.
Yeah, really, So I mean, earlier you were talking to us about the Shriner Institute.
Yes.
Right?
So there's 3 major lines in Masonry: the York Rite, the Scottish Rite, and the Ancient Order of the Mystic Shrine, which some people call the York Rite the Christian line, and some people call the Shrine the Islamic line, because it uses Islamic symbolism. They use the curved crescent, the knife, the sword, the scimitar, the stars are all part of the shrine, and what's called Shriners. You sometimes see them in parades with those little hats, also parodied on The Simpsons, right? They really exist. One interesting fact about them, they own an incredible amount of hospitals in the U.S. There are Shriner hospitals. You can look them up. They're publicly acknowledged as such. They're Shriner hospitals. What they're known for, like you have, whatever, Memorial Sloan Kettering, which everyone knows from their constant advertising is great at cancer treatment, right? But Shrine hospitals are really great at burn treatment. They've researched it extensively, and they're the best in the world at treating burns. And the kind of absurd historical reason that they wanted to be so good at treating burns is because their father figure, Jacques du Molay, was burned alive. So they forever wanted to heal people of being burned. Now, in my mind, that's a patently absurd reason for constantly researching how to treat people from burns, but that's the reason they give in Masonry and in public, I believe. At least in Masonry, that's a well-known fact that's why they indulge in that. They also operate a fairly high number of children's hospitals, which is interesting. And here's one thing which is going to make you laugh. Masonry operates this little-known program. It is public. You can look this up online. You'll probably find it. I was able to find it online. They offer this program to Masonic families mostly, but also to others, in the way that Girl Scouts might sell Girl Scout cookies or something, or you get those little canes from donated to the Lions Club or whatever. They have this program, and this is the funniest thing, but it's called the Childhood ID Program, and the acronym is CHIP. And I'm like, who came up with this marketing? You're fired. Like, it's the most absurd, really? That's what you're calling this program? So it's a real program. You can put your child in it, and what it purportedly does is it gives them what they call additional ID and means of identification should the child ever be kidnapped or abducted. And I'm thinking to myself,
What the heck, dude?
I'm thinking to myself, is there a big need for this? So anyways, you give your child this extra ID cards and some blood tests and some other stuff so that if your child ends up, I don't know, trafficked somewhere, that they'll be able to speedily recover them for you. This is the purpose, stated public purpose of this organization.
Evidence that crazy stuff is happening to kids right now. It's peripheral evidence. This is crazy.
And maybe, given those facts, which I did not know at the time that I learned about this program, given those facts that have come to light, perhaps this is a way of safeguarding the children of the elite from accidentally falling afoul of a trafficker, perhaps. Like if you're accidentally kidnapped, they'll immediately know that it's some high-level Mason's kid and they can't mess with them, right? So whatever. But this is an actual real program that exists and it's public. You can look it up later and you'll probably laugh. Not laugh too hard though, because it's very terrible. But this program exists to protect children, according to Masonry.
And this is directly related to the Masons or the Shriners particularly?
The Masons directly.
The Masons directly.
Yeah. King Solomon, definitely a very important figurehead kind of figure in Masonry. Esoteric symbols, they've been around forever. I think a lot of the actual meaning has been lost. Nick Cage basically tells you what will happen to you if you reveal it, and they're pretty serious about this. They're claiming descent and right to rule based on connection to Jesus or other biblical figures or important historical figures. Even the word foundation, like charity, I think may come from Masonry. Some people in more esoteric circles say that the real treasure that the Masons, the Templar Masons or the Templars guarded was the actual esoteric teachings or cultivation teachings of Jesus.